Hello and welcome to Actual Play Swords Without Master. Um, in the past, we've done like Saturday morning or Sunday morning swords.
Yeah.
So I think this is Saturday morning swords if you're in the future or if you're in a time zone that is significantly ahead of us. Maybe this is Saturday morning swords for you. But I'm Sean Nittner. I use he, him pronouns. I haven't played Swords in a long time, and I certainly haven't played it with all of these wonderful folks. So I'm really, really excited to do that. As with all of our other shows, right now on the channel, and until otherwise, we are raising money for Black Lives Matter and for the Trans Legal Defense Fund. So I will put the little link in chat. If you sub to us, that will go there. That would be great. If you want to donate on your own, that would be great. If you want to contribute in other non-monetary ways to help make the world a better place, that would also be wonderful. So we thank you for any of those things. How about yourself, Alex?
Hi, I'm Alex Roberts. I use she and her. I'm a game designer, and I haven't played this game before, and I'm very excited to. But I have been watching a bunch of Thundar the Barbarian lately, so I feel very prepared. I feel very capable and very eager to jump into it.
How about you, Gian?
Hi, I'm Gian. I also have never played Swords Without Master, but I've wanted to for a long time. I did recently play a hack of Swords of the Serpentine by Emily Dresner and Kevin Culp, where we were the Three Musketeers, or it was loosely based on the Three Musketeers. So there were many swords involved. So like Alex, I'm very prepared tonight.
I think as long as swords are in this stratosphere, you're all good, right? Like we don't need any specific swords. Yeah. How about you, Jabari?
I'm doing well. Hi, I'm Jabari Weathers. I'm also a game designer and frequent illustrator for indie RPGs. I haven't played Swords Without Master before, but I've done illustrations on Worlds Without Master and other issues. So, but I've heard wonderful things about this, and I'm pretty excited to dive into some roguish antics this evening.
Yeah. And finally, Epi. Tell us
about
yourself.
I'm Epi. I wrote Swords Without Master, and I'm super excited to play this particular game here with these people. I think by the time we're done, it might be Saturday morning swords where I am. I'm not sure, but we'll see what we can do. Just really hyped to do this. Should I get into how this game works?
Why don't you tell us as though we haven't played before, which is generally speaking true.
Yes.
And for folks that are hanging out with us, how one plays this game.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'll start off with the usual caveat to please stop me and ask any questions. I've explained this game so many times that sometimes my brain doesn't pay attention to me explaining the game, and I could get ahead of myself here. All right, so Swords Without Master, we're going to play rogues. These rogues are rogues in not necessarily in the D&D sense, but in a more, I don't want to say classical, but the definition of rogue I'm going off of is a legal term from England, in medieval England, which meant somebody who is not visibly employed and owns no land, right? So this is roughly where you are. You're the people who wander about the town or from town to town or whatever, and people are maybe a little suspicious of you, but you're also very useful to them because we can get you, or you have something to say there, Sean?
Yeah. Hold on. I mean, does not employed, does having gig employment sort of count in this?
So, I mean, you have
because
to...
Because so we're all rogues right now.
Right, yeah, no.
So...
It's a world of rogues.
It is known.
No,
I feel like you're talking about me and everyone here.
That is very much it, right? Like, we're talking about a world in which, either you had a lord who owned the land that you worked for them, and so you're visibly employed for them, or you're maybe you know, like somebody that went to town and sold, you know, your tinkered goods or your butcheries. I don't know. But the thing is, you're either that or you are the people that own the land. And if you were neither one of those, you were dangerous to that system, and that's what you are. You're not, you don't fit in, but that makes you sometimes useful to people, sometimes dangerous to people. Sometimes people are really happy to see you there, sometimes they're not. That can make you sexy to people. It's whatever we want to do with that. So we're going to play rogues in that sense. You're also heroes in the very classical sense, which means not necessarily of virtue. You certainly can play virtuous heroes if you want, but heroes that are capable of doing great things, right? Like Hercules wasn't necessarily virtuous, but could move a river if he had to, right? Like that's. And I'm not saying you're all going to be able to move rivers. We'll get into what your characters will be able to do, but like heroes in that sense. I guess what I'll do here is I'll just talk a little bit over what we're going to do in this game. We're going to have these 2 dice, which are out on the table here. I'm moving them around so everyone can see. The purple die is going to be our glum die. The orange die is going to be our jovial die. And we're going to roll these whenever, whenever the phase tells us to. I've got confused what kind of game this is. We're going to roll these, and they're going to tell us the tone that our narration is going to take, right? Glum is not necessarily just going to be sad. It's going to be a whole range of tones that kind of fit or relate it to that. They can be, your narration can be cooler, like you can describe like physically cooler things, like the atmosphere, like the room got chilly, or you drank a nice cold ale. Or you can describe things that are quieter, that are calmer, that are darker, things that happen during the night. The minor key, if there's a soundtrack going on, feel free to describe any soundtrack that's going on. The jovial is going to be not quite the opposite of that, but somewhat. It's going to be louder things. It's going to be brighter things, hotter things. It's going to be maybe a major key, more up-tempo. One of the examples I like to use, and people who've watched this channel have probably heard this several times, is if you're describing your character angry with someone and you roll jovial, you're like, well, how do I, like, jovial doesn't sound angry. You just switch over to something else like louder or more passionate, so you can describe your character frothing at the mouth and screaming at this person. If you rolled glum, you could just describe your character just giving them just an icy side eye, or like some sort of staring daggers into them. That's what we're going to deal with there. And the other thing I want to kind of say about this narration bit is that we're gonna be on your side when you're narrating this. We're not judging whether or not you've done something glum or jovial. We're going to just be like, yep, that you're going to just try and hit your tone, which sometimes means describing a very loud thing, even though you rolled glum, to just point out the very quiet moment in the middle of this cacophonous battle. And then you're like, but I tune all that out and I just march straight for my foe. And then we're like, yep, you hit glum, that's fine, we're all good. We're just instructed to go alongside you with that. So that's basically how those are going to work. I mentioned phases. I'll go into those in a little bit, but like the game is going to happen in one of 3 phases. It's going to be the perilous phase, which is a phase where your rogues' lives are on the line and they're doing battle with things. There'll be discovery phases where your rogues are either revealing something about the world through their memories or their personal experience, or discovering something about the world, something that they're interacting with. And then there's the rogue phases, which are a little bit like a catch-all, and they just kind of give us moments to show off how awesome our rogues are, for lack of a better term there. So let's talk about what we're going to do for making rogues, because that's what we're going to think about right now. In this game, the rogues are going to need a name, and you're also going to name things that are deserving of a name, which are things that are important to the rogue in some way. Now, there's a mechanical thing to this, so you can come up with whatever name you want for your rogue, and then you say, and my rogue sword is called Grey Wand. I'm borrowing from Fafhrd and Grey Mouser here, but it's called Grey Wand, and it's important to me. And because you've written down that name of that sword, that means that nobody else in this game can tell you the fate of that sword. They can offer up a fate. I could be like, he steals Grey Wand from you. Is that like something that you'll let happen? But you, because you've written it on all that deserves a name, gets to say, no, that nobody would steal Grey Wand from me. That's not. Or you might be like, yeah, I want to see what happens when some fool decides to steal my sword. That's up to you. So one of the reasons to write something down under something is that it's important to you, but it's also something that you want to make sure that other people don't step on your toes while it's happening. But also, it's totally fine for it not to be an important thing. It's just something that is with your character. Grey Wand might just be this, whatever sword you're carrying at the moment, you just call Grey Wand. You break it all the time. You pick up a new one, and you're like, this one's Grey Wand. So you have to write down the name of your rogue and anything that's deserving of a name. Then what we're going to do is we're going to write what are called the feats heroic. And this is, we're going to take a little example of something your rogue might do in each of these two tones, the glum and the jovial tone. You know what? This is what I missed, the most important part. And I apologize for this. I'm going to step back for just one moment. What we're going to need for these rogues, before all else, is you're going to need an eidolon. And an eidolon is something of our world, something that exists here for us as players to interact with, that reminds you of your rogue. And quite often people will use art that they have around or they've seen or they've made, but it doesn't have to be. It could be music. It can be a drink that reminds you of what your rogue drunk in their homeland. It could be a piece of a poem. It could be an actor that you think would play the rogue, but it has to be something of our world that we can experience that reminds you of the rogue. And it doesn't have to be specifically of the rogue. You could be like, here is a beautiful painting of a field, and that is the field in which my rogue's grandfathers were buried, right? Like that's totally fine too. But something of our world that reminds you of the rogue. So think on that. Should I go on? Should I take a moment here, or what do you think?
Tell me where in the text the stuff about the eidolon is.
Oh, yeah, sure. It is on page 15, which is the second page, I think, of the game. It is in the upper right-hand corner. There is a italicized section, and it is, I think, the third paragraph in there. It's been a while since I've read that text.
This is why when we're doing it like every Sunday, we just like started getting it down because like I've done this.
Yeah.
We're all relearning it.
At what point do we pick our eidolon? Because I'm looking at some things.
Yeah,
and,
sure.
Yeah, pick it right now.
But like, does it? Because the thing is, there's two things that I think could potentially serve this purpose for my character. I don't know if I want to throw it out there or maybe throw it to the chat, but let me just grab these objects.
Oh, you have that.
You got physical objects. Oh my goodness. Robert's showing us all up already.
I thought that was part of it.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's two possible things. This is a
Ooh.
cast iron vessel that my great grandmother used to keep holy water in.
What?
Yeah, so she would just like on certain days of the year, just go and get a certain river water, and just so that you always had some holy water in the house. You never know. So either this or this is Meowth, and I keep him nearby at all times to to fill me with courage and determination. And I feel like Meowth is like a very kind of self-serving, fun trickster god type guy. So I don't know if we pick them right now, but these are the two objects that immediately caught my eye, and I want to pick one of them. So I don't know, something to think about.
I'm super happy about either of those choices. If you want to combine them as well, that's fine. If that's a thing that works in your head, go for it. I'm not going to stop you.
Interesting. Okay, so I should just keep thinking about it.
Yeah.
It sounds like. Okay.
I actually, much like Alex, immediately thought of a couple things that I'd like to inform my character. One of them is a painting called Truth Coming Out of Her Well to Chastise Mankind.
I love that painting.
Yeah. The other is actually a story about the Greek philosopher Diogenes. When a bunch of philosophers were in the forum arguing about the nature of man, he came in with a plucked chicken, like a raw one, and plopped it down and said, "This is man." And I'd like that to be another Eidolon.
Yes.
And I think that those two, I'm also going to say, hey, buddy, are you ready? I'm also going to say, this dude's an Eidolon.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm going to say Roland's going to be a little talisman in my game. What's that, Roland? Are you famous? Ooh, hello. Yes, no, you can't go there. So yeah, 3 Eidolons right there.
Excellent.
Becky, the Agony asked, is that like 1 million copies of Wolfspell behind Becky? The answer is yes, it's 1 million. They just go in every direction forever.
Yeah.
I'm curious. So can an Eidolon be like a sensation?
Yes.
Cool.
What you?
This is kind of like weirdly. It starts more concrete, and I think it becomes more abstract. I've been listening a lot to an album by Slowdive called Pygmalion, which is like their least appreciated, but it's also really ethereal and full of well-used reverb and delay. And it's like this very expansive feeling. There's a lot of fireworks going off. My background, by the way. So that may also be another yes. Yeah. I think just kind of that like resonance and the way that it fills a room is something. But not in a like concrete way, more just like, oh, the temperature of everything has changed. The feeling of the space has changed by this sound and this atmosphere is kind of the Eidolon that I'm picturing for character.
Yes.
Really good album, by the way. Everyone should listen to it.
What is it called again?
Pygmalion.
All right.
I will put links in chat where I can.
Okay.
My Eidolon is maybe. Well, I'm not gonna be negative about my Eidolon. My Eidolon is Mermista from She-Ra.
Yes.
She is a confident, snarky sea witch, and she can be bothered she can be bothered to go on adventures, and she is often bothered to go on adventures, and I love her.
Perfect.
So she calls to me when I watch that show. I'm always like, when is the next Mermista scene gonna be? I'm She-Ra and Catra, but when do I get to see Mermista? So she will be. I will play a character of the sea.
Yes.
In that vein.
Awesome. Okay, this is great. All right, now what we'll do is we'll write the feats heroic, You might not have a full conception of your character yet. Hopefully this will help a little bit. But the feat's heroic. You're going to have a glum one and you're going to have a jovial one. And the easiest way to deal with this is to imagine your rogue in a life or death situation, reacting to it in a glum way and a jovial way. And the really old joke that I tell every time I explain these rules is that this is sword and sorcery fiction. They don't have to be three-dimensional characters, but they have to be at least two-dimensional. We have to have both a glum and a jovial side to your character. And the reason for that is in early playtests, we had people make Elric McGlumgloom, and they would roll jovial and just stare at me like, what am I supposed to do with this? My character hates the world and would never be jovial. So try and, this helps you think about these characters in both of the tones. And the other thing that is, that this gets you is there's a little mechanical thing where once in the game, at one point in the game, if you don't like the way the dice just rolled, the way you just rolled the dice, you can ignore them and go with one of those tones as long as you do the thing that is written in your feat heroic there for that tone. Now, I'll also say this doesn't have to be, and maybe shouldn't be, something that your character does all the time. This is perhaps something that your character might do in the future, right? So it doesn't have to be like, I'm always whistling this song and happy. It could be, this is a song I've promised never to whistle, so the day I whistle it, we know that we're in trouble. I want to meet that rogue. Yeah.
So, Epi, tell me again what the name of the thing that we're doing right now.
This is the
feats heroic, right?
Feats heroic, yes.
Yeah, and we should have one for each.
One glum and one jovial.
Yeah.
And then there's only one more thing to do to make a rogue, but I'll let this happen before I get into that. And when you have one, feel free to share it too. There's no reason to keep these secret.
I have them. All right, Tidefalla, my character.
Mm-hmm.
In the same practice as names like Castaspella and Netfasa. Tidefalla, jovial feat is picking flowers and decorating herself with them, and her glum feat is drowning those around her in the ocean water.
Ooh.
Which, I don't care where we are, we can be in the desert and Tidefalla will be able to summon the ocean through the land. It's gonna happen. I'm okay with it. I think I'm gonna start decorating our Roll20 sheet with things. Since I made a little bit of room.
Oh.
For things like this. See if we can fit it in. That's invisible.
Oh, I think I see it. Oh yeah.
I mean, it's visible, but it's...
Yeah, there you go.
I'll show everybody in. other folks feeling in the way of feats?
I'm not sure if these quite make sense as this, but I
Give it a
can-
shot.
Cool. My glum feat is, and the name of my character is LaQueen. So LaQueen echoes the pains of their foes as their own.
Ooh,
I like it.
nice.
And then their jovial feat is their voice calls forth dreams and nightmares.
Yeah, that sounds
Yes,
very jovial.
yes.
I love it.
I have some feats, but I don't have a name. I don't
Oh,
know if
okay.
there's what's the best way to conjure up a name that feels appropriately swordy and sorcery.
That is a good question. Is there like a good sword and sorcery name generator?
Sort of.
This is me before every single game ever.
Yeah,
Normally,
yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's for swords.
Just like
Okay,
take a normal name and make it 20% harder to say.
Yeah, that's
It's okay. I just looked up a list of Vulcan names.
that's perfect.
Wow. Did you know that Vulcans tend to have a Federation standard way of writing their name and like a classical Vulcan? Like Golic Vulcan.
Huh.
Interesting. But all that to say, yeah, Kovar. Kovar is good. We're gonna go with Kovar.
Sounds
Kovar.
good.
How do you spell Kovar?
Kovar.
Cool.
And yeah, Kovar's glum heroic feat will be to break the delicate silver chain around my wrist. And Kovar's jovial heroic feat heroic will be to call in a favor with the sparrows.
Yes.
Yes.
Jabari, if it's okay, I'm going to ask you to tell us yours again so that I can put them here as well. But
I'll move those dice for you.
awesome.
Oh no.
So how do I spell LaQueen?
LOQUIN.
Awesome. And what is? Oh no! Don't change font size on me. I do not understand Roll20 sometimes. It's just like, nah, you can keep changing the font, but it's not going to work. Cool. And their jovial feat is to summon forth nightmares? Say it again.
So their jovial feat is their voice calls forth dreams and nightmares. I'm going to adjust that a little bit. Their voice calls forth dreams and nightmares in tandem.
Oh.
And their glum feat?
They echo the pains of their foes as their own.
Thank you. All right. Well, this doesn't show up quite perfectly over this backdrop, but it is something. Thanks everybody in chat for putting up with Roll20.
And when you're ready, Sean, I've got mine.
Oh yeah, yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Go for it.
Okay, so my rogue is named Gleek Laris. Gleek is spelled Gleik, and Laris is spelled Larus.
And Gleik?
Eik, yeah.
Got it. Okay.
Laris, by the way, is the genus name for several species of gulls in the Bay Area, which I've been reading about all day. And taking that as a point of inspiration, Gleek's jovial feat is that she can break bread endlessly with all manner of living creatures that have been designated as vermin. So whatever food that she has, she can endlessly replenish it with rats, with gulls, with mice, with roaches, whatever decide to come and partake of her plenty. Her glum feat is that she can call upon those swarms of the same animals to devour alive and whole whoever she deems deserves it. And that's Gleek.
Wow. Yes. All right.
You got it. All right.
All right, I got to take it down a notch here and explain the rules, and I apologize because, like, I'm like, let's get into this.
I mean, we'll be fine.
Yeah, we'll definitely be fine.
Do things.
Don't forget coming up with names. All that deserves a name. We'll have a moment to just kind of introduce the characters when we're done here. The next and last thing we need for the characters is what's called a trick. And a trick is it's a way to break the rules a little bit to make the story about your character in a moment. And there are specific tricks, and I'll go through what those are, but they're not going to make any sense right now because they all interact with the rules of the game. So let me step back again and then kind of go through how the game's going to work, and then we'll come back and figure out the tricks for the characters. So at any given moment, we're going to be in a phase. I am going to play, you're all rogue players. I am going to be the overplayer. And my job is to, unless somebody has a trick that tells me otherwise, is to choose what phase we're going to be in and to start that phase. And I do that by picking up the dice and rolling them. And that tone, in this case, jovial, will be what's called the overtone. And the overtone is the tone that we all have until someone, all right, the overtone is the tone that we all have. After that, you'll get dice and you'll be able to roll them. And when you do it, you'll get your own tone and you can ignore the overtone. But in the beginning, we're all in the overtone. And when the phase begins, I tell you, it's a total railroad when the phase begins. I'll tell you who's there. I'll tell you why you're there. I'll tell you what condition you're in. I probably can't tell you how you're feeling about it, but I can certainly hint at how you're feeling about it. And then I'll tell you what's going on, and I'll certainly tell you what kind of phase we're in, whether it's a perilous, discovery, or rogues phase. And then I'm going to, if we were playing at a table together, I would pick up the dice and I would give you what's called the thunder. And the thunder is a distant threat. It's a little thing that I will say that may or may not come to fruition. But it's something like if I start, describing I start describing like some scratching in the wall, which it doesn't work for thunder when we have Gleek here. But anyways, if I start describing some scratching in the wall and pick up the dice, you know, as players, that might be something to worry about, even if whatever I'm describing might be kind of innocuous or whatever. And here's an important thing that I need to point out at this point is that this game will have all of us sharing narration at different points. And if I say there's some scratching in the wall and I pick up the dice and I don't tell you anything else about that, then it's fair game. Like if you later on want to be like, and the scratching in the wall, turns out there was like a bobcat stuck in the wall. You don't have to ask me permission to do that. You can straight up do that. But I may have a plot in my head for what that is and what might come in. So every phase has this thunder. I'll pick up the dice. But because I can't pick up the dice to do it, I'll literally tell you that I'm giving you the thunder. and tell you what it is. Then we'll go into the phase, and depending on the type of phase, well, I think with every phase, I'm going to hand the dice to one of you. And if we're doing a perilous phase, what's going to happen is I'll hand the dice to one of you, and then I will bring the storm, which is an immediate threat that you cannot ignore. And let's say, for example, that I hand the dice. Where did my? There we go. Hand the dice to Kovar here. Uh-oh. We might have to put the dice, figure out how to get the dice onto the top layer of everything. Otherwise, it'll be a little hard moving them around. Oh, you're muted there, Sean.
Oh, sorry. I will move all the things, all the text to be in the map layer so we don't accidentally click on it.
That's good. So I'll start describing the storm, which is an immediate threat that you have to deal with. The storm may be something that's affecting Kovar, might be affecting any one of the other characters. And in the perilous phase, I'm just going to start giving you worse and worse things that are happening. Everyone who doesn't have the dice, well, actually everyone is allowed to describe what their characters are doing to slip and struggle with the storm. So if I'm like describing an endless army of myrmidons coming over the hill and just washing like a tidal wave against the four of you, holding them off with whatever weapons you have at hand, I might start off like that. And Kovar is Alex, right? Yeah. So Alex might just be holding on to the dice going, sure, that's nothing. And then everyone during that time would describe what their characters are doing that would be slipping and struggling with this problem. And by slipping and struggling, I mean you can't overcome or succumb to the problem. You can just be like, we're trying to hold them back, but they keep pushing us further and further towards the, I'm assuming on a shore for some reason. I think because I picked myrmidons, I have like Troy ahead of me, and what anyway.
We're definitely by the ocean. No.
Yeah. And so you could describe like holding a shield up and being pushed back in the sand or whatever, but you can't describe overcoming these myrmidons or ultimately succumbing to them. The only person that can do that is Alex when Alex rolls the dice, right? So you're, by holding on to those dice, telling me, make it worse, Epi, make it worse. And I'm going to keep doing it. And then you roll the dice when you want me to shut up. And that is your power. You're just like, no, shut up, Epi. Now I'm going to do it. And you roll the dice, you hit the tone, you describe what what Kovar does. You can certainly describe Kovar slipping and struggling with it again, or you can describe Kovar overtaking this enemy or succumbing to this enemy, whatever fits the tone and what you think is right for what's happening in the narration. If you, excuse me, 1 second. If you want, you can even go so far as to tell me how it affects, like you could just describe Kovar, you rolled glum, let's say, and Kovar just, we should put pronouns down for these characters here. Kovar just throws weapons down and stands there, and they flee, just terrified of this act of like, or whatever. That's fine. Or you can be like, this is what Kovar does. Epi, how do they respond to it? That's either way, whatever you're most comfortable with. And then when you're done narrating in the perilous phase, you either hand the dice back to me saying, we're done with this perilous phase, let's move on, or you hold on to the dice and I will continue to bring the storm, and it'll be up to someone else to roll to interrupt me. Now they can't roll yet because you have the dice. So you get to hold on to them and create some type of tension if you want, and then you can hand it off to them whenever they want, and they can hold on to them and try and create tension with it. That's how the perilous phase is going to go. We'll keep, and going like that until somebody hands the dice back to me and says, we're done, we're through with this.
Question.
Yes.
So can we roll the dice and then hold on to it after? Like, is that or is it always passed after you've rolled?
Let me see if I got the question right. You can roll the dice and narrate your thing. Are you talking about roll the dice to see what it'll be and then wait for more stuff to happen? Or
yeah, like, can you just like say like, okay, cool, so like this happens and then I'm going to sit with this and wait for it to get even worse and stew.
So the way the rules work is that you could do that if you're like I just do this little thing and then now I'm just going to hold on to the dice. You can't roll the dice twice in a row. That's the only rule. So so you could do that and then hold on to them, but you'll have to pass them off before someone else can roll them.
Oh, so you can like cook the circumstances for someone even if you have rolled, but
yes,
like you can't make that second. Okay, cool.
Yeah, and I will, like, I talk about this in the book, in the magazine, in the little game, this tiny game. One of the things you're going to want to do is invest your foes with glory, so that you can harvest it from them when you finally defeat them. So while you're fighting them, probably the first things you want to do when you roll these dice is to show your foe overcoming you, if it's an interesting foe. If it's not an interesting foe, defeat them straight out. Just knock them off and just be like, whatever, Epi, these Myrmidons are boring to me. Bring me something with wings and I'll bring you some. Anyways, so that's how the perilous phase works. Like I said, the perilous phase only ends when the person who rolled the dice hands them to me. I can't end a perilous phase. Only one of you can end the perilous phase. The other phase is, let's talk about the other ones. A discovery phase, what's going to happen is I'll start the phase, like I just said. I'll tell you where you are, what's happening, and I'll give you a thunder and pick up the dice. Then I'm going to hand the dice to one of you. You're going to roll those dice immediately, and hitting that tone, you're going to discover something about the world, and that this may be something that you already knew and you're just revealing to us. It may be something that you're finding at your feet right now, like, look at this magic sword. It's the important bit is that we are getting it through your rogue's memories or experience. It's through your rogue that we're finding out about the world. You can come up with whatever you want. It can be like a magic sword. It can be like, it doesn't have to even, and this is important, it doesn't have to even relate to the tale as we've been telling it so far. So you might be like, we have a discovery phase right after the Myrmidons, and I describe it as being at some a camp further inland, and one of you just wants to tell the story of a constellation that's in the sky. Perfectly fine. That is because what's happening in this phase is I'm fishing as the overplayer. I'm fishing for where this story is going to go next. I'm just listening to all these things, all these ideas you're giving me, that I will then steal and wield against you. But what you have to do is, after you discover something, is you have to ask me a loaded question about it, or rather a leading question about it. You have to ask me it, essentially not a yes or no question, right? So you can tell me about this the story of this constellation in the sky, and then you can turn to me and you can't say, is it still there in the sky? Because that's a yes or no question, and I feel like that will have an obvious answer, no, because if it's, yeah, it's still there, we're done. Like, but no. Instead, you could be like, why can't we see it? We should be able to see it this now. And then I'm on the spot and I have to tell you what that is. Whatever I tell you is something that your rogue knows and can convey to the rest of the group. The only way the discovery phase ends is when, after I've answered one of those questions, I say, we're done, we're moving on to another phase. If I don't say that, then you, if you had the dice, pass them to someone else, and they will make a discovery in the same way. And I know there's a lot of information to take in, and we'll go over it when we actually play. I'm just kind of giving you an overview here. Finally, the rogues phase starts off the same way. I roll the dice, I get an overtone, I tell you where you are, what's happening. Choo-choo, we're on the railroad. And then I'll give you a thunder, and then I'm going to hand the dice to one of you, and I'm going to make a demand. And a demand is always worded like, show us how, or show us. So I might be like, show us how you get the rest of the Myrmidons to join your cause. And I'll hand the dice to you. You roll the dice immediately, hitting that tone. You tell us how you get the rest of the Myrmidons to your cause. Then, when you're done, you get to turn to another one of the rogue players, hand them the dice, and make a similar type of demand. So you could be like, show us how you take us and the Myrmidons and sail us to the edge of the world. And we'll keep doing that, going around and around however we want, however long we want, until someone, it doesn't matter who, says, I think we're done with the rogue phase. So the perilous phase only ends when the person who has the dice says it's done. The discovery phase only ends when I say it ends because I'm the overplayer. The rogues phase ends when anyone is like, okay, let's move on to another phase. Not that big of a deal, but I should point out that we don't have to change the phase. Like if we end a phase, we could start the exact same phase again. Phases and scenes are separate, so we can have several phases inside the same scene, or we can have several scenes inside the same phase. We're also unbounded by time, so we can certainly have flashbacks. We can flash forward, whatever we want to do there. All right. That is the basic structure of the game. And now there's two other things I need to tell you about. And that is the threads and how we end the game. Whew, okay.
You got
it. Yes. All this time, I've been telling you what happens when like either the jovial dies the highest or the glum dies the highest. And I can hear you, every one of you thinking, Epi, what happens if there's a tie? Like, what do we do then? And the answer is, it gets more fun. When we have a tie, the overtone is going to flip. It's gonna, right now our overtone is jovial. If we got a tie, then it would go to glum. That is always an escalation. So if everybody is in a tavern and is jovial and we're all just kind of partying, and then we get a tie, it flips to glum because somebody bumped the wrong person and everybody goes quiet. And they're like, oh no, this might be a fight. And that's an escalation. Maybe we're in that glum phase right there, or that glum tone, and somebody else rolls a tie, and then we flip over to jovial. That means the fight has broken out because now we're all loud and raucous and throwing things around. And we could just keep going like that. If the that is, but also the other thing is, is any tie is what is called a stymie, which means whatever you were intending to do, you can't. And it doesn't mean that it's impossible for you to do. It just means that you are currently thwarted from doing it. And you get to come up with whatever that is. But if you don't want to, you can leave that to me. So you can say, well, I was going to offer him a drink to heal the wounds between the Myrmidons and us, but something stopped me. What was that, Epi? And I can tell you, I don't know off the top of my head right now, but you are certainly allowed to do that yourself. You're allowed to say, I was going to do it, but people kept beating me to the punch, like his own warriors kept buying him drinks. I don't know. All right, so that's a stymie if it's a tie. If we roll the dice and neither one of the dice is higher than a 3, right? So if one of them's a 2 and the other's a 3, or one's a 1 and the other's a 2 or whatever, you're going to get what's called a moral. And a moral is what you did. You succeed, or not necessarily succeed. You get to do whatever you intended to do, but there's going to be an unintended consequence to the thing that you're going to do. Again, you get to make up what that unintended consequence is, but as the overplayer, I can decide if it has enough bite And if I don't think it does, I can add more to it. And this unintended consequence should have an effect on what's happening. It can't just be like, oh, I accidentally spilled a drink on myself when this happens. But it can be like, I spent the last of our money that we were going to use to buy, passage off of this wretched island or whatever, something like that. And when you do that, when you roll a moral and you come up with this unintended consequence, then you have to come up with a lesson that you might learn from this, right? So it might be always check how full your purse is before buying a drink. But it might also be like, don't buy drinks for fools. Whatever you think the lesson should be that you learn it. And if you look on our Roll20, there is a section for morals here. And we're going to write that down, whatever that lesson is, under the morals. If you rolled the dice and neither one of them is greater than 3, and they're a tie, it's a stymie, like I said before, but whatever stops you has to be something supernatural or unknown. And that is going to be a mystery. You don't tell us exactly what it is, you just kind of hint at it, like I was going to buy him a drink and then the drink disappeared. And then you write a question about that. Where did that drink go? Or why do all my drinks keep disappearing, or whatever? And we're going to put that under the mysteries, which is also on there. So those are threads, the morals and the mysteries. We have one other kind of thread to talk about here, and this is the most important one. This is called the motif. With the motif, it doesn't happen when you roll the dice. What you want to do is just listen to what your other players are saying. And when someone says something that sounds very sword and sorcery, and something that just hits the right tone of wonder or adventure or even violence or whatever you think of as like, this is juicy sword and sorcery narration, write it down under these motifs here. We're going to start under the first motif, and the first time someone does that, it doesn't matter. You don't have to wait for anybody's permission. You just write it down. The only rule is that you can't write down something you said, right? You can't be like, I am the best narrator. You write it down there, and there's 3 bullet points under the first motif. Once we fill that up, we'll move on to the second motif. One of those bullet points in the second motif has to echo a bullet point from the first motif. So if in the first one we have a bullet point that's like a serpent-drenched altar, and then later on, we will want to, in our narration, we'll want to, in our narration, to try to echo this sort of thing. And I will certainly try and do it. Maybe I'll describe a giant serpent that you have to fight, and somebody's like, yeah, giant serpents, that's total sword and sorcery, and you can write that down. Or maybe somebody else describes another altar, but instead of it being covered in serpents, this one is very clean and weirdly pristine despite being in old ruins. And you can write that down. All that matters is that it just sort of echoes, and we all kind of agree that it echoes the previous one of the bullet points from the previous motif. After we filled in the second motif, we go over to the third motif. We do the same thing. One of those bullet points in the third motif has to echo something from either of the two. We don't have to echo both of them. We just need one that echoes something from either of the two. After we filled the third one, we go into the end game. So the motifs are our timing mechanism. So fill them up as slow or as fast as you want to get through the game. Just keep an eye on them and deal with them that way. Once we enter the end game, we're no longer recording any threads. And what happens is you're going to start reincorporating these threads in your narration. We'll play the game just like we've played it before in the same phases and everything else. But when you reincorporate something, when you take a moral and you prove that you've learned the lesson, or prove that you'll never learn the lesson, or teach the lesson to someone else, some way reincorporate that moral, then you have, we cross that moral out. Your character is done. You can no longer get the dice in this game. Your character is still in the game. You can slip and struggle, and you can do that. but you no longer get the dice, which is fine, because once 3 of the 4 of you reincorporate in this fashion, the game is over. We're done. We're shutting it down right at that moment. And then if we feel like we need an epilogue, the 4th player who didn't can roll the dice and give us a few sentences of an epilogue if we need it. We don't necessarily do. So, all right. I think I've gone over everything. So let's just do some. Oh, you got questions? Yes.
Tricks.
Tricks. Yes. So the tricks of the trade. Each of you should have one trick and only one trick, and no 2 of you can have the same trick. I am going to, if you got the game open on page 20, there are 4 tricks to start off with. They're not all 4 of them are the best for first time play. Let me see here. Okay, so Locust is a trick that just right now you write down a location, some place that you want to make sure that we visit. And then while we're playing the game, at any point between phases, you can say, Epi, no matter what, this next phase has to take place there. It doesn't matter what's happening in the story, we have to do it. The Omen is where you write down a thunder, and so again, you write that down now, and then at some point while we're playing between phases, you'd say, Epi, no matter what, this very next phase, the thunder has to be this. I've written what the thunder is. Unparalleled is where you get to replace one of the tones. And that one's a bit tricky for the first time playing. But if somebody's like, I don't really think my character works with jovial or doesn't work with glum, and I think this is a better description, you can go ahead and grab that. Undenied. This one. Okay. Undenied is you write another feat heroic for one of the tones. And when you use that feat heroic, the overtone immediately becomes that tone and changes everyone else's tone to match, right? So this is this actually fits a bit with one of Jabari's tones, the voice. No, wait. No, I was thinking of your description of the character, your Eidolon. I wasn't thinking of your tones or your feat heroics. I apologize. Anyways, so Undenied, you basically write one more feat heroic and you say, like, if I do this feat heroic, then everyone's tone becomes this tone. And then on page, scrolling through, we're getting there. I think I have to describe all of the, here we are, page 32, Inevitable Foe. This is where you write down something you want to make sure you absolutely fight, and then you can say at any point between phases, this next phase has to be a perilous phase, and we're fighting this thing. Like, I really need to fight a vampire tonight, so we're going to make that happen. Canny Cognition. That's where you write down some way your character is able to know stuff about the world. This may be a fount of knowledge that they have. It might be their memory. It might be like some extra sensory powers. And but it might just be they have like a heightened sense of smell or whatever. And you can, between phases, say, this next phase is going to be a discovery phase, and we're going to be in a situation where I get to use this to make my discovery. The Adroit Prowess is where you write down some astounding capability that your rogue has, and you say this next phase is going to be a rogue's phase, and it cannot end until I've shown off this power, I think. Let me just see. Oh, no, I have to open it.
Trick.
Yeah. So I've got, I have the power of flight, and this next phase has to be a rogue's phase, and it has to start off with a demand from Epis showing that I can fly. Ill Fate is where you write down a lesson, a moral, and you can ignore a die roll and say, I learned this moral instead. This is what my, this is what the actual die roll created. A Doom is a, you write down a mystery, and you get again, you roll the dice. You be like, I'm ignoring it. We're going to get a mystery. We're flipping the tones, and this is the question that the mystery is going to be. And then the destiny allows you to pre-fill in one bullet point on each of the motifs, which means as we play, we have to make sure we have to hit on that element before we can move off of that motif, right? So you could be like, I want to see a castle that walks on legs. So I'm going to write that under the first motif. And then we can't get past that first motif until you come upon a castle that walks on legs, that sort of thing. And I think that's it for that's it for the tricks that are available in the basic game. We're not doing the advanced game tonight. I apologize.
Sounds good.
I can go over any of those again if you have questions. Did any of them call out to anyone?
Will it be appropriate to kind of address them as they come up in play? Because, I just know I'm going to forget stuff until it's actually like relevant.
Sure. Yeah. With the trick, that's something you probably want to write beforehand. But I will say, and this is a thing that like, it is perfectly normal to go through the entire game and not use a trick and not use a feat heroic too. Like that's happened quite a few times as well. So, yeah. So at this, I didn't describe this well enough, but right now we're just picking each of you is picking one trick. You don't have all of these at your disposal. Yeah. You get to pick one of them from this list.
Do any of them speak to?
I mean, I'm really into Omen personally. I feel like that really matches Gleek's aesthetic, generally speaking. But if someone else is really called to it, I'm happy to choose something else.
No, you hang on to that one. What's the one adroit something where it's just I have this really, really cool skill and I get to kind of call my shot before the scene begins or whatever?
Yeah, so that's the adroit prowess. You just write down whatever that is, and then you can say before a scene, you could be like, before a phase, you could be like, Epi, this phase has to be a rogue's phase, and you have to make a demand that shows off my ability to whatever that is.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a fan of the Canny Cognition, which is a similar kind of ability that puts us into a discovery phase.
I'm curious about that Doom.
All right.
How about that Doom?
How about that Doom? The Doom is the one where you write a moral, right? Or no, it's a mystery. Yes. Yeah, so you get to write a mysterious question, something about something unknown or supernatural. And at some point in the game when you're like, I don't like this roll, instead, I rolled a mystery. And here's what the question related to that mystery will be. So.
Ooh, okay, cool.
My Canny Cognition is knowledge of everything ever drowned.
Oof.
I think everything and ever is a little absolute there, but knowledge of everything drowned, maybe.
Yeah.
Should I reveal this question ahead of time?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah, I should say, like, this game definitely is all about the dramatic irony. Like, it's fine for us as players to know things that the rogues don't know. We're good with that.